I inherited 33 million and was driving to tell my son when I got into an accident. He never came to the hospital. When I called him, he said, "Mom, I just don't have time for this stuff." Weeks later, he showed up with his new wife to see if I was still alive. He saw me and froze. "My God," he whispered. "She's my—" "Where are you watching us from today?" Leave your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. But first, let me tell you how we got here. My name is Clara Elizabeth Hayes. I'm 67 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was convincing my son Ryan to come over for dinner more often. How naive I was. It all started one Tuesday morning when I got a call from my Aunt Elaine's attorney. "Ms. Hayes, I need you to come down to my Atlanta office as soon as possible. There's a very important matter to discuss regarding your aunt's estate." Elaine had always been the black sheep of the family. She never married, never had children, and according to family gossip, she'd made a fortune in Miami real estate during the 80s and 90s. No one spoke to her except me. I sent her Christmas cards and called her on her birthday. The family had written her off as odd and antisocial. "Your aunt left you everything, Ms. Hayes," the lawyer said, sliding a stack of documents across the desk. "Properties, investments, bank accounts. The total amounts to approximately $33 million. I stared at the numbers on the paper, convinced there had to be a mistake. 33 million. More money than I'd seen in my entire life. More money than I would need in 3 lifetimes. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Completely sure, ma'am. Your aunt was very specific. She said you were the only person in the family who ever treated her like a person, not a walking ATM. Apparently, Elaine had more in common with me than I thought. I walked out of that office in shock. 33 million. I could buy Ryan a house, help with my grandkids' college funds, travel, do everything I'd put off for years, working as a dental office manager. I was so excited that I decided to drive straight to Ryan's house to give him the news in person. I wanted to see his face when I told him all our financial worries were over, that he wouldn't have to worry about his construction business loan, the kids' tuition, or anything else. But I never made it to his house. 3 blocks from his subdivision, a delivery truck blew through a stop sign and T-boned me on the driver's side. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was thinking Ryan is going to be so worried. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later with a fractured arm, 2 broken ribs, and a concussion that had me seeing double. The first person I saw was the nurse Maria, a sweet woman who explained where I was and what happened. "Does anyone know I'm here?" I asked in a rasping voice. "Your son is listed in our records as your emergency contact," Maria said. "We called him the day of the accident." My heart eased. Of course, Ryan would be on his way. He was probably managing the situation, talking to the doctors, making sure I had the best possible care. He was a good son. He'd just been incredibly busy lately with his new real estate development firm. But hours passed, then days. "Has anyone visited me?" I asked Maria on the second day. She looked at me with a pitying expression that turned my stomach. "No, honey. Do you want us to call someone else?" Ryan hadn't come. His mother was in the hospital, had been unconscious for 3 days, and he hadn't come. He hadn't even called to check on me. I dialed his number with trembling fingers, hoping there was some explanation, some emergency that had kept him away. Maybe Sarah, his wife, was sick. Or one of the kids. "Mom?" His voice sounded distracted, like he was multitasking. "Ryan, sweetie, I'm in the hospital. I had an accident." "Yeah, I know. The hospital called." He said it so casually that for a moment I thought he hadn't heard me right. "You know? Then why haven't you come?" "Mom, I'm in the middle of a major bid for a new shopping center. I can't just drop everything and run to the hospital for every little thing." "Every little thing?" I had been unconscious for 3 days. "Ryan, I was out cold. The doctors didn't know if I was going to wake up." "But you did, didn't you?" "Look, I don't have time for this right now. If you really need something, call Sarah." He hung up. I was left holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, wondering if I had dreamed the entire conversation. My son, the boy who used to cry if I cut my finger in the kitchen, had just told me he didn't have time for this stuff. Maria came back to check my vitals and must have noticed my expression because she sat in the chair next to my bed. "Is everything all right, Clara?" "My son is very busy," I said, trying to sound understanding instead of shattered. "His business, you know how it is." Maria nodded, but I could see in her eyes that she'd witnessed this scene before. Elderly patients whose kids were too busy to visit them in the hospital. I spent 5 more days there, 5 days during which I received not a single visit, not a single call asking how I was, nothing. When I was finally discharged, I called a taxi to take me home. As the driver helped me with my bag, I wondered when exactly I had lost my son. But I had other things to think about, like what to do with $33 million. And for the first time since the accident, I smiled because I had just realized something very important. Ryan knew nothing about the inheritance. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog of painkillers and phone calls. Auntie Lane's lawyers needed signatures, banks required documentation, and there was a mountain of paperwork to officially access my estate. During all that time, Ryan didn't call once. Sarah did, but only to ask if I could watch the kids on Saturday because they had an important dinner with potential clients. When I told her I was still recovering from the accident, there was an awkward silence. "Oh, right, the accident," she said, as if she just remembered. "Are you better now?" "I still have a fractured arm, honey." "Well, but you can sit and watch TV with them, can't you? It's just for a few hours." I told her no. For the first time in years, I told my daughter-in-law no. She was so surprised she hung up without saying goodbye. It was during that 3rd week that I finally had full access to Aunt Elaine's accounts. I sat in my small living room, surrounded by statements and legal documents, trying to process the magnitude of what I had inherited. 33 million, properties in Miami, tech company investments, savings accounts that generated more interest in a month than I earned in a year. And then I had a terrible and wonderful idea at the same time. What would happen if Ryan and Sarah knew what I had inherited? Would they suddenly remember they had a mother? Would they show up with flowers and apologies, pretending the last 3 weeks never happened? I decided to run an experiment, a little test to see what kind of son I really had. I dialed his number. "Mom, I'm busy," he said without even saying hello. "Ryan, I need to tell you something important about Aunt Elaine. That kooky old lady who died. What's she got to do with me?" That kooky old lady. That's how my son referred to the woman who had just made me a millionaire. "She left me something in her will." "Seriously?" For the first time in weeks, he sounded genuinely interested. "What did she leave you?" And that's when I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of telling him the truth about the $33 million, I said, "She left me her house in Coral Gables. It's small, but it's in good shape." "Oh." The disinterest immediately returned to his voice. "Well, I guess that's something. I don't know what you'll do with a place in Miami, though. It's probably more expensive to maintain than to sell." "Maybe I'll sell it," I said, "or maybe I'll move down there." "Move? Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're 67 years old. You can't just start over in another city." "Ah, but I could. With $33 million, I could do exactly what I wanted, but Ryan didn't need to know that, not yet." "You're right, sweetie. That was a silly idea. Look, I gotta go. Sarah and I are going to look at a property for the new development. I'll call you later." He didn't call. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. If I was going to make major decisions about my money and my future, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I needed to know who my son really was and what had become of the loving child I had raised. The investigator was named Leo Miller, a serious man in his 50s, recommended by Aunt Elaine's lawyer. I gave him a picture of Ryan and Sarah and asked him to tell me everything he could about their lives, their finances, and especially how they spoke about me when I wasn't around. "Are you sure you want to know this, Miss Hayes?" Leo asked me. "Sometimes the information we find can be painful." "I'm sure," I told him. "I need the truth." 3 days later, Leo called me. "Ms. Hayes, can we meet? I have information you need to see." Leo arrived at my house with a thick folder and a serious expression. "Before I show you this, I want you to know that what you're about to see could change your relationship with your son forever." "My son didn't bother to visit me when I was unconscious in the hospital," I said. "I think that relationship is already pretty changed." Leo opened the folder and showed me the first photograph. It was Ryan and Sarah at an expensive restaurant, raising champagne glasses. "This photo was taken the day after your accident." The day after. While I was in intensive care, they were celebrating something. "Do you know what they were celebrating?" "Yes." Leo pulled out more photographs. Ryan had closed a major contract, but based on what I could overhear, they were primarily celebrating that you have finally had a wake-up call about your place in their lives. My place? Leo showed me another document. Ms. Hayes, did you know your son has been telling people that you have memory issues, that you sometimes behave strangely, and that he and Sarah are considering long-term care options? I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What kind of options? He's been consulting with attorneys about obtaining power of attorney over your finances. Apparently, he believes you have a substantial savings account from your work at the dental clinic and your late husband's pension. I let out a bitter laugh. My substantial savings account had about $8,000 in it before I inherited Aunt Elaine's fortune. But of course, to Ryan and Sarah, who lived paycheck to paycheck, even that looked like a fortune. Is there more? Leo hesitated. Ms. Hayes, there are recordings. Your son and daughter-in-law are not very careful when they talk in public places. He showed me a small recording device. These conversations were recorded in public restaurants where anyone could have heard them. I broke no laws. He pressed play. Sarah's voice filled my living room. I don't understand why you keep pretending you care what Clara thinks. It's obvious she's losing it. She's not losing it, Ryan responded. She's just stubborn and dramatic, but you're right about pretending. The sooner she accepts she needs help, the sooner we can take control of her money. And if she doesn't accept, then we'll have to force the situation. A couple of documented incidents of confusion, maybe an accidental fall, and any judge will grant us power of attorney. My hands started shaking. They were planning to hurt me to steal my money. My own son was planning to hurt me. There's more, Leo said softly. The recording continued with Sarah saying, honestly, the accident was a blessing. Now we can say the trauma affected her mind, especially after she doesn't remember having that weird conversation about moving to Miami. What conversation about Miami? I asked. Leo paused the recording. Apparently, your son told several friends that you had a delusional conversation about moving to Miami after inheriting a house. He said it was clear evidence you're losing judgment. But I had never seriously mentioned moving. It had only been a passing idea during our phone conversation. Ryan had taken that casual talk and turned it into evidence of my supposed dementia. Ms. Hayes, Leo said, there's one more thing you need to know. Your son isn't just planning to take control of your finances. He's been telling people that you probably won't live much longer due to the progressive nature of your condition. My condition? The dementia he's fabricated for you. I sat in silence, processing what I had just heard. My son wasn't just planning to rob me. He was setting the stage so no one would question it when I conveniently died after signing over all my assets. But Ryan didn't know I didn't have just $8,000. I had $33 million, and I had just decided exactly what I was going to do with that money. Leo, I finally said, I need to hire you for something else, and it's going to require you to be very, very discreet. The next 2 weeks were the busiest of my life. With Leo's help and a team of lawyers recommended by Aunt Elaine's firm, I began orchestrating the most elaborate plan of my life. First, I transferred $32 million into a special trust account that could only be accessed under certain specific conditions. I used the remaining $1 million to buy a beautiful house in Coral Gables, fully furnished and under the name of a corporation Leo helped establish. I also hired a private security firm to install discrete cameras in my current home. If Ryan and Sarah were planning to manufacture incidents to document my supposed dementia, I wanted evidence of anything they attempted. But the most important part of the plan required patience. I needed Ryan and Sarah to think their strategy was working. I needed them to feel secure, confident, ready to show their true nature. The opportunity came when Sarah called me again to ask me to watch the kids. Clara, I know you've been acting weird lately, but we really need you to watch Michael and Anna this Saturday. It's Ryan's parents' wedding anniversary party, and we can't bring the kids. Ryan's parents had died 5 years ago, but I decided to play along. Of course, honey. What time are you bringing them? There was a surprised pause. She clearly didn't expect me to say yes so easily. Really? I thought you'd make some excuse about your arm. My arm is much better, and I miss my grandkids. Oh well, great. I'll bring them at 6. When Saturday arrived, Sarah came with the children and a completely different, smiling, almost affectionate attitude. Clara, you look so good. That accident really rattled you, huh? A little, I admitted. It made me think about a lot of things. What kind of things? About family, about what really matters in life. Sarah's eyes lit up. She clearly thought I was softening, getting ready to accept her help with my finances. After she left, I had a wonderful afternoon with 12-year-old Michael and 8-year-old Anna. We played games, watched movies, and ordered pizza. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly happy. It was Anna who, unknowingly, gave me the most valuable information. "Grandma," she said while we were eating ice cream after dinner, "why did Mom tell Dad that you're acting crazy?" My spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. "When did she say that, sweetie?" "Last night. They were talking in the kitchen, and Mom said you had said weird things about moving to Miami and that it was probably because you hurt your head in the accident." "What else did they say?" Anna shrugged. "Dad said you might need help remembering important things, like where you keep your money and your important papers." There it was. Confirmation that they were planning exactly what Leo had discovered. "Grandma," Michael said, looking at me with concern, "are you okay? You're not acting crazy." "No, sweetie, I'm not acting crazy. I'm just learning new things about some people." When Ryan and Sarah came to pick up the kids, I noticed how carefully they watched me, looking for signs of the confusion they had been fabricating. I decided to give them exactly what they expected. "Is it time to go already?" I asked, feigning confusion. "But you just got here, Sarah." They exchanged a quick look. "Mom," Ryan said gently, "we've been here all afternoon. It's 10 o'clock at night." 10? I looked at the clock as if I couldn't understand what I was seeing. But I thought it was 6. "Mom, are you feeling all right?" Sarah sounded worried, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. They finally had their evidence. "I feel a little confused," I admitted. "It's been a long day." After they left, I reviewed the security camera recording. It had captured the entire conversation, including the gestures and glances they exchanged when I feigned confusion. But the most interesting part was what they didn't know I had recorded. While they were gathering the children's belongings, Sarah had opened several drawers in my kitchen, clearly searching for financial documents. Leo was right. It was time to accelerate their timeline. In a week, Ryan would call me with a proposal for help that would be impossible to refuse, but I would be ready for him. The call came exactly 1 week later, just as Leo had predicted. Ryan sounded nicer than he had in months. "Mom, Sarah and I have been talking. We're worried about you." "Worried about what, sweetie?" "Well, since the accident, you've been different. And last Saturday, when we picked up the kids, you seemed confused about what time it was." I kept my voice soft and slightly vulnerable. "Really? I don't remember being confused." "Exactly. That's the problem, Mom. You don't remember things that just happen." There was a pause, and then Sarah took the phone. "Clara, we want to help you. We've been looking into it, and we think maybe you need someone to help you manage things day to day." "What kind of things?" "Well, finances can be complicated when you're not feeling entirely yourself. Maybe it would be better if Ryan and I helped you with the bank accounts, paying bills, that sort of thing." There it was, the trap fully set. "I don't know," I said, letting my voice sound doubtful. "I've been managing my own finances for 40 years. "We know, Mom," Ryan intervened. "But things have changed, and honestly, it would be a weight off your shoulders. You could focus on recovering, and we'll take care of everything else." "Everything else?" "Just the boring stuff," Sarah quickly said. "Bills, taxes, making sure you have enough money for your expenses, things that stress you unnecessarily." "I guess we could try it," I finally said, "but I don't know how that works legally." "Oh, don't worry about that." Ryan sounded relieved. "I already talked to a lawyer. You just need to sign some papers that give us power of attorney to help you with your finances. It's very simple." Of course, he had already talked to a lawyer. He probably had those papers ready before my accident. "When would you need me to sign?" "How about we come over tomorrow afternoon? We can take you out to lunch and then take care of all the paperwork." "Okay," I said, "but I want to read everything before I sign." "Of course, Mom. You can take all the time you need." After hanging up, I immediately called Leo. "It's tomorrow. I need everything ready." "Everything is in position, Ms. Hayes. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "More sure than ever." I couldn't sleep that night. For 67 years, I had been a woman who avoided a conflict, who did everything possible to keep the family peace. But my son had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He wasn't just planning to rob me, he was willing to hurt me to do it. The next day, Ryan and Sarah arrived promptly at 2 p.m. Sarah brought flowers, cheap daisies from the supermarket, and Ryan had a thick folder of legal documents. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Ryan asked, carefully studying my face. "A little tired," I said, "but better." We went out to lunch at a family restaurant where we had been many times when the kids were little. Throughout the meal, Ryan and Sarah were the perfect image of concerned children. Attentive, affectionate, constantly asking how I felt. If I hadn't heard the recordings, I would have thought they really cared about me. After lunch, we returned to my house to review the documents. Ryan spread the papers on my dining table with great ceremony. "It's pretty simple, Mom. These documents give me legal power to help you with your finances. I can pay your bills, manage your bank accounts, make sure everything's in order." "And what would I do?" "You relax and enjoy your retirement," Sarah said, smiling. "You don't have to worry about any of this anymore." I read every document carefully, feigning confusion now and then and asking them to explain certain sections. What they were asking me to sign wasn't just authority to pay bills. It was complete control over all my financial assets. "Ryan," I finally said, "this says you would have total control over all my accounts. Isn't that a bit extreme?" "Mom, it's just to protect you. If something were to happen, if you got confused about something important, I could step in and make sure no one takes advantage of you." The irony was perfect. He was asking me to sign documents to protect myself from people who would take advantage of me while he was taking advantage of me. "Okay," I said, picking up the pen. "I trust you, sweetie." I signed each document with a shaky hand, not from nervousness, but from the anticipation of what was about to happen. Ryan and Sarah looked so relieved I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Thank you, Mom," Ryan said, carefully putting the documents away. "This is going to make things so much easier for everyone." "When do you start helping me?" "First thing tomorrow. I'm going to the bank and arranging everything so I can access your accounts." "Perfect," I said, smiling like a grateful grandmother. I couldn't wait to see his face when he discovered what he had actually signed. At 9:47 a.m. the next day, Leo called me. "Ms. Hayes, your son just arrived at the National Bank. He's asking for access to your accounts with the documents you signed yesterday. How long do you think it will take him to figure it out?" "It should be any moment now." I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and waiting. The security cameras were recording everything, and I had my phone ready to record any incoming call. At 10:15, my phone rang. It was Ryan, and he sounded confused. "Mom, there's a problem at the bank." "What kind of problem, sweetie?" "They say you don't have the accounts I thought you did. The representative says you only have a checking account with $500. I feigned confusion. "Only 500, but that can't be right. I have my pension, my savings." "That's what I thought. Where do you keep your other accounts?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Ryan. I only have one account at the National Bank. I've always only had one account." There was a long pause. "Mom, where is Dad's pension money? Where are your savings from all those years of working?" "What savings, Ryan? I've never had much money. Why would you think I have large accounts?" I could hear him breathing heavily. "Mom, I need you to think. When Dad died, he had life insurance. He had his factory pension. What happened to that money?" "It was spent on the funeral and paying off medical bills," I said honestly. "Ryan, did you think I had money stashed away somewhere?" The line was silent for so long I thought he had hung up. "I'm coming over," he finally said. He arrived an hour later with Sarah, and both looked like they had seen a ghost. Ryan had the bank documents in his hand and an expression of total panic. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, sitting down heavily in my living room chair. "About what, sweetie?" "About your money. Where is it?" "What money are you talking about?" "Ryan, I live on my Social Security and a small pension from the dental clinic. You've always known that." Sarah looked sick. But you always seem to have money when we needed it for emergencies." "What emergencies?" They realized it at the same time. I had never had money for emergencies. In all those years, they had come asking for temporary help. I had either turned them down or made excuses. They had built an entire fantasy around my supposed secret wealth. "The house," Ryan said desperately. "This house has to be worth something." It's mortgage, I lied softly. Your father took out a second mortgage before he died to pay for his medication. I owe more than it's worth. Ryan stared at the walls as if they were closing in on him. But Aunt Elaine, you told me she left you a house in Miami. Yes, a little starter home. But Leo, my lawyer, says it needs so many repairs that it probably costs more to maintain than to sell. What I didn't tell them was that Leo, my lawyer, was actually Leo, my private investigator, and that the little starter home was actually a $2 million mansion that was already entirely mine. Sarah finally spoke, and her voice sounded choked. Clara, are you sure you don't have other accounts? Maybe accounts you've forgotten about? Sarah, honey, why are you so insistent that I have hidden money? Do you need money for something? The question completely disarmed them. How could they explain that they had been planning for months to take control of wealth that never existed? No, Ryan stammered. We wanted to make sure you were financially secure. Well, I'm not rich, but I'm fine. Social Security and my small pension cover my basic expenses. Ryan and Sarah left shortly after, clearly devastated. They had spent time, money, and energy planning to steal an imaginary fortune, but their nightmare was just beginning. Because although they didn't know I had $33 million, they did know they had signed legal documents admitting their intention to financially exploit an elderly woman. And those documents, along with Leo's recordings, were going to be very useful very soon. My phone rang that night. It was Ryan, and he sounded desperate. Mom, can we cancel those documents you signed yesterday? Why would you want to cancel them, sweetie? I thought you wanted to help me. It's just, we've been thinking, and maybe it was rushed. Maybe you don't need help after all. But Ryan, you said I was confused, that I had memory problems. Maybe we were wrong. You were wrong about my mental health? How strange, I said thoughtfully. Because I have a copy of those documents, and honestly, after reading them again, I think maybe I do need help remembering things. What do you mean? Well, for example, I can't remember why you and Sarah were so sure I had money hidden. Can you help me remember that? He hung up without answering. Perfect. For the next 2 weeks, I watched as Ryan and Sarah's lives slowly crumbled. Leo kept me informed of their movements, and the security camera recordings showed their increasingly desperate visits. They came to my house almost every day, always with new questions about my financial situation. Was I sure I didn't have other accounts? Had I checked all the safe deposit boxes? What exactly happened to Aunt Elaine's estate? Each time, I feigned more confusion, which frustrated them enormously. But they couldn't complain about my confusion without admitting they had been lying about my supposed dementia. It was during the 3rd week that I received the call I had been waiting for. Ms. Hayes, this is Detective Sandra Lewis from the Atlanta Police Department. Could you come down to the station? We have some questions about your Aunt Elaine Hayes. Of course, I had called Detective Lewis the previous week. I arrived at the station dressed like the concerned grandmother I was supposed to be. Detective Lewis was an intelligent woman in her 40s who welcomed me into her office with coffee and cookies. Ms. Hayes, we understand you recently inherited a property from your aunt. Yes, a little house in Miami, although my son says it's probably not worth much. Has your son seen the property? No, but he understands those things. He has a construction business. Detective Lewis nodded. The problem, Ms. Hayes, is that we've received information that someone has been asking questions about your aunt's properties, asking about the value, researching if there are other assets, that sort of thing. What kind of person would ask those questions? Good question. Have you noticed unusual behavior in anyone close to you? Family members who are suddenly very interested in your finances? I told her everything. The power of attorney documents, the constant questions about money, the way Ryan and Sarah had been acting since my accident. I pretended to be confused and worried as if I didn't fully understand what was happening. Ms. Hayes, Detective Lewis said gently, would you be willing to cooperate with an investigation? We believe your son and daughter-in-law might be involved in a larger scheme of elder financial abuse. Abuse? But they're my family. Unfortunately, most financial abuse against the elderly comes from family members. Would you be willing to wear wire during your next conversations with them? I feigned nervousness and indecision, but finally accepted. Of course, I already had recordings of everything they had said, but I needed the police to obtain legal evidence. 2 days later, when Ryan and Sarah came for another one of their concerned visits, I was wearing a police microphone, and they, finally desperate, said exactly what I needed them to say. "Mom," Ryan said, "you need to be honest with us. Where is the real money?" "What real money?" "Don't play dumb," Sarah exploded. "We know you have to have more money. No one lives on as little as you pretend to live on." "Sarah, please." "No, we're tired of this game, Clara. We've been investigating and we know Aunt Elaine was a millionaire. Do you really think she only left you a rundown house?" "But the lawyer said." "To hell with what the lawyer said," Ryan yelled. "Find that money, or we'll find a way to make you tell us where it is." "Are you threatening me, sweetie?" "I'm telling you we've invested too much time and money in this plan for you to mess it up now." There it was, the full confession that it had been a plan all along. "What plan?" I asked in a trembling voice. Sarah and Ryan looked at each other, realizing they had said too much. "Nothing, Mom," Ryan quickly said, "and we're just frustrated." "Frustrated about what?" "Because I don't have the money you expected me to have." The silence that followed was deafening. That night, Detective Lewis called me. "Ms. Hayes, we have enough evidence to proceed. We're arresting your son and daughter-in-law tomorrow morning." "Seriously?" "Planned fraud, conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, and now threats. Yes, it's more than enough." I hung up the phone and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, Ryan and Sarah would discover that the confused woman they had been manipulating was actually a millionaire who had been documenting every step of their plan. But I still had one more surprise for them. The arrest was perfect. Leo called me to say it had gone exactly as we had planned. Ryan and Sarah were arrested at their home at 6 a.m., handcuffed in front of their neighbors, and taken to the station in separate police cars. Of course, they called me immediately after they were allowed to make their phone call. "Mom, you have to help us." Ryan sounded hysterical. "The police say you reported us for fraud." "Fraud? What fraud, sweetie? They say we had a plan to steal money from you." "But Ryan, I don't have any money to steal. I told the police that." "Then why did they arrest us?" "Because they asked me if you had been acting strangely, and I told them about all the documents you made me sign and all the questions about money. They told me it sounded like you were planning to take advantage of me." "But we would never do that." "Ryan, yesterday you yelled at me and asked me where the real money was. The police recorded that whole conversation." There was a long silence. "Mom," he finally said in a small voice, "you have to drop the charges." "I can't, sweetie. Detective Lewis says that once a report for elder abuse is made, the state takes over the case. This is going to ruin our lives. Maybe you should have thought about that before planning to steal from your mother." I hung up and immediately called Leo. "Are they in jail?" "Yes, but they'll probably be out on bail this afternoon. Their lawyers are already working on it." "Perfect. Is everything ready for the next phase?" "All set, Ms. Hayes." That afternoon, while Ryan and Sarah were at the police station dealing with lawyers and criminal charges, a moving truck arrived at my house. I had hired a professional company to pack all my belongings while I visited a friend in Tampa. By the time Ryan and Sarah were released on bail and rushed to my house, they found a note taped to the door. "Sweetie, I've decided to move to Miami after all. Aunt Elaine's little house needs someone to look after it. And after everything that's happened, I think I need a fresh start. My new address and phone number are with my attorney, Leo Miller. He can contact me if you really need to talk to me. With love, but no money, Mom." According to Leo, Ryan read the note 3 times before realizing what it really said. Then he started banging on the door and yelling until the neighbors called the police. Having a restraining order against him didn't help his legal case. But the real surprise came 2 days later when Leo officially delivered my parting gift, a $500,000 civil lawsuit for emotional distress and medical damages caused by their fraud scheme. 500,000 tsars? Ryan yelled on the phone when he found out. "Mom, you don't have $500,000. "No, my sweet boy, but you're going to have to find it. My lawyer says my case is very strong, especially with all the recordings." "What recordings?" "The police recordings, Leo's recordings, the security camera recordings. Ryan, I documented everything, every visit, every conversation, every threat." "Mom, this has to be a joke." "A joke? Like when you pretended I was crazy so you could steal my money? That kind of joke?" "We never pretended you were crazy." Ryan, I have recordings of you two saying exactly that. I have recordings of you planning to manufacture incidents to document my supposed dementia. The line went silent. Mom, he finally said in a small voice, can you forgive us? Can we start over? Of course I forgive you, sweetie. You're my family. Really? Yes, I completely forgive you. But that doesn't mean I'm going to drop the charges or the lawsuit. What? Forgiving doesn't mean allowing you to hurt me again. Forgiving means I'm no longer angry. But justice is still justice. Mom, please. Ryan, I spent 30 years raising you, working 2 jobs to give you everything you needed. I paid for your college. I helped you with the down payment on your house. I watched your children for free for years. And when you thought I had money to steal, you decided it was easier to hurt me than to ask me for help. We would never have actually hurt you. You threatened to manufacture accidental incidents to prove I was crazy. How is that not actually hurting me? He had no answer for that. Ryan, my lawyer says you have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit. I suggest you use that time to think about why a 67-year-old mother had to become a private detective to protect herself from her own son. I hung up and looked out the window of my new house in Coral Gables. I had an ocean view, a beautiful garden, and for the first time in years, complete peace. But I still had one more surprise for Ryan and Sarah. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my beautiful Miami home, reading the local newspaper when I saw the headline I had been waiting for: local couple sentenced for elder fraud. Ryan and Sarah had been sentenced to 2 years probation and 200 hours of community service, working with victims of financial abuse. They also had to pay me $300,000 in damages. My lawyer had negotiated a settlement. But the most satisfying part was the final paragraph of the article. The case has been highlighted by elder rights advocates as an example of how victims can take control of family abuse situations. My phone rang. It was Michael, my 13-year-old grandson. Grandma, I saw the article in the paper. Is it true that Mom and Dad tried to steal from you? I sighed. The children had been living with Sarah's parents since the arrest, and it had been a delicate process maintaining a relationship with them without speaking ill of their parents. Yes, sweetie, it's true. Why would they do that? Sometimes adults make very bad decisions when they're desperate for money. But you didn't have money to steal, I laughed. Well, Michael, that's an interesting story. What do you mean? Remember when I told you that sometimes we learn new things about people? Well, sometimes we also learn new things about ourselves. Grandma, I don't understand. Michael, what would you say if I told you that your great-aunt Elaine left me a little more than a small house? There was a pause. What do you mean? I mean I inherited $33 million. What? And that the whole time your parents were planning to steal my supposed savings, I had more money than they could possibly imagine. But then why didn't you tell them? Because I needed to know who they really were. And sadly, I discovered that your parents were willing to hurt me for money that didn't even exist. Michael was quiet for a moment. Grandma, does that mean we're rich? It means I'm rich, sweetie. And I'm going to use that money to make sure you and Anna have everything you need for college and for your lives. Are you going to help my parents? It was the question I had been waiting for. Michael, would you help someone who tried to hurt you? No. Your parents are going to have to learn to live with the consequences of their choices. But you and Anna don't have to pay for your parents' mistakes. Can we visit you? Of course. In fact, I was thinking of turning the guest room into a game room for when you come. After hanging up with Michael, I called Leo. How are things going with the foundation? Everything's ready, Ms. Hayes. The Elaine Hayes Elder Protection Foundation will be operational next month. I had decided to use 30 of my $33 million to create a foundation that would help other elderly people who were being financially abused by their families. It would be my legacy to Aunt Elaine, who had clearly understood something about human nature that it had taken me 67 years to learn. That night, as I ate dinner on my terrace, watching the sunset over the bay, I reflected on everything that had happened. I had lost my son, but I had found my own strength. I had discovered betrayal, but I had also discovered justice. And for the first time in years, when the phone rang, I didn't feel dread. It was Anna, my 9-year-old granddaughter. Grandma, Michael told me about the money. Is it true you have a pool? Yes, my love, a very nice pool. Can we swim in it when we visit you? Of course. In fact, I was thinking that maybe you'd like to spend part of the summer with me. Really? We can, Grandma, please. I smiled, seeing my reflection in the window of my beautiful new house. Maybe I had lost a son, but I had gained something more valuable: self respect. And at 67, I had learned that it's never too late for a new beginning. Yes, my love, you can come whenever you want, because in the end, the best revenge wasn't the money Ryan would never get, nor the jail he went to, nor even the lawsuit he lost. The best revenge was discovering that I no longer needed his love to be happy. And that, dear audience, was priceless.